In this lesson, we'll be exploring the plot arrow function. So this is not a function that I have used in any of my scripts, but it is an interesting function that is worth exploring in the course. So let's do that. What you see right now is I am plotting an arrow onto my chart, and the value that this plot arrow function takes is a float number. And that float number dictates how large the arrow is. So right now I'm plotting an arrow with the value of the closing price minus the high. So if I zoom in here, that gives us the closing price minus the high, which would obviously be a negative number since we are subtracting a higher number from a lower number. And notice that the arrows are larger on the candles where the close is further from the high. So we get a large candle here. On a smaller doji candle type of pattern, we get a very, very small arrow or very short arrow. So that's what the plot arrow function does. So this could be useful for something like plotting the candle size. So the high minus the low. If I save this code, now we get larger arrows on bars that are larger. So there are all kinds of creative use cases for this function. As I've said, I don't use it in my scripts. I never have. But you could do some cool things like analyzing volatility. You could use these arrows to plot large amounts of volume or relative volume. You could use it to indicate increases in expansions in volatility using the ATR indicator, or how oversold or overbought an RSI or stochastic or MACD indicator is. There's so many different ways we could use this function. For today's lesson, I'm just going to introduce you to the parameters of this function. We're not going to use it in a practical sense, but once you understand how all of these parameters work, you will be able to use this any way you see fit. So let's move on to some of these other parameters. The next one is obviously title. We can call it whatever we want. I'll just call it arrow for now. The next thing we have is color up. So this sets the color of a positive value. So obviously by default, it's bright green. But if I set this to, let's try color.white, for example, save the script. Now our up arrows are white. If I flip these values, so low minus high, and I change the color down parameter to, let's say color.blue, save the script, we'll now have arrows above our candles and the down arrows are blue. So let me try something different. Let me try the open minus the close. This should give both up and down arrows. There we go. So I could set color up to color dot yellow, for example, save that. And now our up arrows are yellow, our down arrows are blue. But let's get rid of these parameters for now, and we'll leave the default red and green colors. And let's have a look at these other parameters. So we also have offset. Now offset, hopefully you're familiar with this by now if you've watched the other plot lessons. This just shifts the, whoops, I forgot a comma here, and I got a confusing error. 9 times out of 10, when you see this red error message pop up, it's because you missed a comma or a parentheses or something. Let's save the script. And so now we are offsetting our arrows by 1 to the right. So every time we draw an arrow, it is plotting 1 bar to the right. If I set this back to 0, which it is by default, all of our arrows should shift to the left. There we go. So that's what the offset does. Just offsets your plot from the bar that it is drawing on. Next we have min height. So let me open up the documentation here and read what this does. So this is the minimum possible arrow height and maximum possible arrow height in pixels, which is interesting. Let's set our min height to 1 and our max height to 500. Let's see what that does. It should be interesting. Let's zoom out a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So this is drawing a max height of 500 pixels on your screen and a minimum height of just 1 pixel. So we have very tiny arrows and very large arrows. That's what min height and max height does. And that's really it for this function. The other parameters here are the same as the plot shape function and the plot character function. We have editable for the control freaks out there that don't like people changing their styles, their plot styles. We have show last, which dictates how many bars we can show this arrow on from the current bar. And then we have display, which just turns this off. So if I set this to display.none and save my script. So now the arrows are turned off by default, and if the user wants to turn them on, they need to come up to the settings menu and turn this little box on. Anyway, that is it for the plot arrow function. It's quite a simple function, but an interesting one because of its dynamic resizing. The way that the value you pass in here dictates how large the arrow is. I'm sure there are plenty of creative use cases out there. If you find a good use case for this, please let me know. Send an email to support, or even better yet, show it on the forum or in the Discord server. I would love to see what you guys come up with this function. I think it's pretty cool, but I've never really had a reason to actually use it in my scripts. I've never found a use case where it was appropriate to use this function in place of the other functions that PineScript offers for displaying information. Anyway, that's it for this lesson. Hope you found it interesting. Have fun playing around with this, and I'll speak with you in the next lesson.